Have you ever watched a movie and thought, wow, that was amazing, but I never want to watch it again? That was more or less my experience playing Shadow of the Colossus for the first time in 2026, over 20 years after the original release. Within the first few minutes, it is abundantly clear that the game is special. The art direction and tone alone do enough to make it stand out from the crowd. And playing through the game, it becomes easy to see why Shadow of the Colossus might be your favorite game developer's favorite game. But goddamn if it isn't tedious. I got lost so many times looking for the next Colossus, even with my lightsaber guiding the way. And the sheer number of times I got knocked off of that flying dude and needed to restart the process of slowly swimming to a platform, shooting the Colossus to get his attention, mounting the beast, and hanging on for dear life made me reconsider this video entirely. Despite that friction, the game sticks with you. So sit back, relax, and let's talk about what makes Shadow of the Colossus a classic story and experience, flaws and all. I intentionally played through the original PS2 release of Shadow of the Colossus for a simple reason. I wanted to know if the game, as it was released on October of 2005, still holds up. The short answer is yes. This is a prime example of understanding technical limitations and squeezing every last drop out of them to achieve visual and mechanical mastery. This game is absolutely gorgeous. The sparse landscapes are intentionally so, and they instill the isolated melancholy which is necessary to portray the tragic story. This subtractive design choice calls attention to that isolation by subverting our expectations. There are no towns here, no rank-and-file enemies, no side quests. Just you, your horse, your weapons, and Colossi. The fights with the Colossi are genuinely tense and cinematic. I found myself frequently holding my breath as Wander clutched that mammoth fur for dear life. The anticipation of each killing blow is unlike anything I've experienced, and that soundtrack blends perfectly with the feeling of grandeur during each breathtaking battle. The game delivers on its premise. I felt like an ant trying to slay a Goliath. The sense of scale and grandeur cannot be overstated. The punishment for screwing up a fight halfway through drives the tension through the roof. I wasn't really afraid of dying, but I was definitely afraid of blowing the fight once I figured out the mechanics and was bull riding some dude's head. That rush of adrenaline quickly gave way to a feeling in the pit of my stomach each time a Colossus crashed to earth as the somber music swelled. Still, for a short game, there were moments where it dragged. I got lost or stuck on sections between many Colossi, and even the beginning of many of the boss battles felt more wearisome than rewarding. Once I got through those sticking points, the spectacle of each battle and the unfolding of the tragic story more than made up for them. Unfortunately, I feel like the thrill of defeating each Colossus, and in fact the quality of each encounter, did trend down as the game went on. Until the final Colossus, which might be my favorite in the entire game. At first, riding aggro was an exercise in futility, as I tried to control her every movement. It took me a few hours to realize that letting go of the reins and simply letting her run is far more enjoyable. Her pathfinding is actually brilliant once you let her run wild, and I was able to take in the scenery and hold up my sword to find the next Colossus without worrying about doing a header off a cliff. The game left me in a weird place, where I would 100% recommend it to anyone with an interest, with the caveat that they understand what they are in for. The highs are incredibly high, and the lows can be frustrating and dull, even in a game that can be completed in well under 10 hours. The story is simple and direct, yet hides a huge amount of complexity beneath the surface. So let's talk about it. All 12 of you who watched my video on what Dark Souls teaches us about heartbreak and loss could probably ascertain that your boy going through it a little bit right now. So when I played through Shadow of the Colossus, the story of Wander desperately trying to bring the woman he loves back to life hit pretty hard. As the game progressed, it dawned on me that the actions of the game mirror Elisabeth Kübler-Ross's 5 stages of grief. The first scene of the game tells us everything we need to know. Wander's love, Mono, has been sacrificed due to her cursed fate. Not to get too graphic about it, but from her appearance, we can see that her death was recent, if not immediately prior to the events of the game. Rather than bury or cremate his lover's body, Wander defies the reality of her death by taking her corpse to this forbidden land in the hopes of reviving her soul. Denial is not only the refusal to believe or accept reality, it is also the refusal to carry on and move forward. Wander denies reality and the natural order of the world, letting his deep and irrational love blind him to reality. This simple denial drives the events of the game. Unlike most grand stories, this is not a tale to save a kingdom or protect the innocent from an evil force. The actions of Wander are selfish and delusional. We are not here to save the world. We are here to defy it. And despite all of this, we empathize with Wander, because who doesn't wish they could reverse some tragic loss in their own life? No matter how many evils we commit, we see the world through Wander's eyes, and we root for him implicitly, rejecting the truth we logically understand. It has sometimes been said that fear and anger are the opposite of love. I don't believe either of those are inherently true. In Shadow of the Colossus, the wrathful actions we take as a player, slaying giants with horrific violence, don't come from an absence of love, but rather displacing the pain that comes from deep, true love. When we lose something we love, the world becomes a strange and bitter place. Wander turns that bitterness into rage, and that rage into death. The Colossi themselves are not natural creatures of the earth, but were created to house the split soul of Dormine. And most of the Colossi are not immediately aggressive towards the player. Some roam aimlessly, some sit in repose, but they certainly do not want to fight Wander. They simply retaliate and protect themselves against his wrath. The world of Shadow of the Colossus is not hostile by nature. There aren't hordes of undead or trash mobs that attack the player on sight. Instead, Wander, and by proxy, we, head out into the world unannounced and uncoerced, and start killing these vessels of a godlike power. And the violence is visceral. Inky black blood spurts in massive geysers from each Colossus as its glowing weak spot is ferociously pierced. The Colossi struggle and cry out in pain before eventually crashing to the earth in death. Of course, grief is not a linear path, and Wander's bargaining happens the moment we first step into the shrine. Wander makes a deal with the proverbial or actual devil, depending on how you choose to view Dormine, and we desperately set out to see if we can bring Mono back to life. Dormine is indifferent at best and malevolent at worst. He appears in a wisp of black smoke, and just listen to that voice. Doesn't exactly inspire warm and fuzzy feelings. We are offered a literal bargain. Kill 16 Colossi, collect their souls, and we might be able to bring your dead girlfriend's soul back from the dead. And Wander does not hesitate. He is so lost in his grief that any deal with the potential to bring his love back to life is accepted in a heartbeat. And we pay the price for this bargain, but more on that below. Now the fun one. Depression.
I'm ready. Depression. I'm ready. Depression.
And making this particular depression even more fun than the usual grief progression is that the bargain we strike in Shadow of the Colossus is actually fulfilled. Real bargaining over the death of a loved one or a lost love generally does not bear fruit. Of course, this wish coming true is a classic example of a monkey's paw, wherein one's wish is granted exactly as requested, with tragic and unforeseen consequences. As the player, the repeated slaying of these peaceful giants becomes impossible to ignore. The adrenaline of the early game is gone, as repetition and exhaustion set in. Our so-called heroism is killing us, and late in the game, we still aren't sure if all of these sacrifices will bring any change to our beloved. Depression is not sadness. Through the lens of grief, it is the bridge between our irrational, immediate actions and the acceptance of reality that may one day come. Depression is seeing reality, truly understanding it, but not yet accepting it. Wander never completes his grief arc. instead going down fighting before he is able to accept reality. There is no happy ending here, no reunion between lovers, just a tacit acceptance of the horrors and the brutal reality our three protagonists now face. Wander got what he wanted, but he paid a cost he never fathomed possible. The true acceptance in the world of Shadow of the Colossus is the one that we experience as the player. As the credits roll, we realize what we have done and are forced to face the consequences of a devastating bargain we helped to enact and the prophecy we helped to fulfill. Wander's inability to grow and accept the truth doesn't just make him an ill-fated character. It fundamentally flies in the face of what we expect from a hero. As human beings, we live in a constant state of dissonance between self-awareness and empathy. We love and understand others, but ultimately, we only have our own experiences to rely on. So when it comes to the story of our own life, we see ourselves as the hero by default. In Shadow of the Colossus, Wander embarks on what he surely believes is a noble mission to save his true love from a cruel and unjust death. He rides a majestic horse and wields a sword of destiny, or at least that's the way it seems to him, and by proxy, to us. Yet we are told in no uncertain terms by the wise Lord Eamon that trespassing in this land is strictly forbidden. With each slain Colossus, the adventurous music halts, overtaken by a lamenting funeral dirge, and Wander absorbs the black soul fragments of these tormented behemoths. This absorption physically alters Wander. He becomes stained with the blood of his enemies. Tendrils lap his skin and darken his veins. His flushed skin turns pallid and sickly, his eyes an unnatural grayish blue, and his hair deathly black. Shadow of the Colossus does not hide the fact that we are not playing as the hero in this story, yet we want to believe so desperately that we are playing as the good guy. I'm willing to bet most players simply rolled with the punches and kept playing under the premise that saving Mono was a noble cause worthy of the carnage we inflict. Yet no action Wander takes is heroic. He failed to save his love before her death. He does not answer the call in the traditional sense. Instead, he brings a corpse to a cursed and forbidden land in an act of despair. Wander does not consider the morals of his actions. He is selfish and short-sighted, and we participate in his mistakes willingly. Something I noticed right away playing Shadow of the Colossus is how out of control I felt. And I don't mean that in some emotional or esoteric way. I mean I genuinely struggled to control Wander and aggro in the game world. Coming off of playing Elden Ring, Bloodborne, Hollow Knight, and Ocarina of Time for making the case videos, I felt like a fish flopping on the dock compared to the precision and control of those games. I don't think that is an accident. We aren't a polished and dangerous warrior. Even our dodge roll comes with the stumble animation baked in. Does this look like someone who is in control? In the final act of subversion, it is Lord Eamon and his men who ride in gallantly to save the world. Not from Dorman or from the Colossi, but from us, from Wander. It is Wander who has become the threat to the peace in this world, and it is Eamon who seals us away to protect it. While it was Eamon who was responsible for setting the wheels in motion for this farcical story of death and misfortune, it is he who is the true hero by story's end. However, this cruel twist of fate is not the cruelest. That lies in the fact that every horrible event in the game could have been easily avoided. Hold on to your nuts and butts, but not to your mothers. Let's talk about Oedipus Rex. And I promise this is worth it, so don't change that dial. Written by Sophocles and first performed around 400 BC, Oedipus Rex begins like any good horror film, with a happy, oblivious family. King Laius receives a mortifying prophecy from the Delphic oracle that any son born of his wife Queen Jocasta will grow up to murder his father and marry his mother. Not ideal. To avoid this terrible fate, Laius orders the baby to be maimed and left to die on a mountain, because allowing a baby to die from injuries and exposure is more humane than just killing him. The baby is rescued, and Oedipus grows up a prince in Corinth, completely unaware of his lineage. As an adult, Oedipus also learns of the prophecy. Mortified as his father Laius had once been, Oedipus flees Corinth to get away from who he believes are his mother and father. On his travels, in a fit of ancient Greek cart rage, Oedipus slaughters a caravan of travelers. In a stroke of tragic irony, one of those men was his father, Laius. Oedipus continues on, unaware of the act he just committed. Oedipus becomes the king of Thebes through some heroic riddle solving, and later, still unaware of his true birthplace and parentage, marries his mother, Jocasta. Comic hijinks ensue where Jocasta kills herself and Oedipus gouges his eyes out so he cannot see what he has done. Classic happy ending. So why am I talking about this in a Shadow of the Colossus video? One of the main points of dramatic irony in the story of Oedipus is that it was Laius and Jocasta's knowledge of the prophecy that led the prophecy to come true. If the king and queen of Thebes had lived their lives as loving parents unaware of the prophecy, what need would Oedipus have to kill his father, the king, or marry his mother, the queen? By exiling Oedipus as a baby, the dominoes of fate began to fall, ending with the tragic end to our story and the tragic beginning to Freudian psychology. In the Shadow of the Colossus, we are not given nearly as much narrative, but the dramatic irony of the story resonates all the same. Wander tells us at the beginning of the game that Mono was sacrificed for she has a cursed fate. Please, I need you to bring back her soul. To which Dorman replies, that maiden's soul? Souls that are once lost cannot be reclaimed. Is that not the law of mortals? With that sword, however, it may not be impossible. Dorman explains that in order to reclaim Mono's soul, Wander must seek out and destroy all 16 colossi that are the incarnations of the idols. He warns Wander that the price you pay may be heavy indeed. Wander responds without hesitation, it doesn't matter. And with that, the game truly begins. We kill the colossi and the idols fall. Wander is overtaken by the spirit of Dorman with each slain colossus, eventually succumbing entirely and being reborn as a vessel of his terrible spirit. Mono's soul is reclaimed, but the curse endures by trapping her in a desolate wasteland while Wander's body lies dead on the cold ground. The dramatic irony here, much like in the story of Oedipus Rex, lies in the fact that the prophecy itself was the inciting incident for every action taken the rest of the game. Lord Aemon, just like King Laius, lets fear of a prophecy cloud his judgment and makes a terrible mistake. The tragedy wasn't just Wander's, it was Aemon's. Were there no prophecy, Mono would not have been sacrificed by Lord Aemon. If Mono had not been sacrificed, Wander would have never come to the ancient lands to revive her. If Wander had not come to the ancient lands, he would have never smote the colossi and freed Dorman's latent spirit back into the world. And if none of that had happened, the world would have remained at peace. The final cutscene in Shadow of the Colossus opens with Lord Aemon and his men fleeing the ancient lands. The same bridge we used to enter the lands in the opening of the game collapses behind them with a supernatural expulsion of light. Mono opens her eyes, seeing herself trapped in a living tomb. Agro limps in, having barely survived her fall. They realize their situation, alive in a cursed land with no way home. Wander's journey ends in death before the story concludes. He dies, never learning from his mistakes, never becoming the master of two worlds, never making the world a better place. If we can intuit that the curse spoken of in the prophecy refers to Mono playing a role in the return of Dorman's power, that prophecy came true through the sacrifice itself. A ruinous and beautiful, self-fulfilling prophecy that stands on par with any Greek tragedy. I have a quick confession before I close this video out. I think I may have piled a few too many of my own expectations onto this 20-year-old game going in. I say this because I want to be fair to the game. There are truly sublime moments to be found here. The soundtrack is the epitome of high adventure and quiet loss. Shadow of the Colossus isn't relevant today because of its mechanics and its gameplay. It holds up after all this time because it showed us the terrible beauty of misplaced love, tragic irony, and unparalleled spectacle. If you enjoyed the video, consider throwing us a like and subscribing to the channel. If you'd like to support our work further, consider becoming a member to have your name shown in the credits like these fine folks. Love y'all.